something to tell you, mate.
Go for
My
it.
my my best friend's nickname, and he's in the film, 'cause I had to stick him in for a cameo. His nickname is Giggsy.
Oh,
So there you go. You're the second gig that I know.
most excellent. You know what? I love unique names. Nothing wrong with Daniel, of course.
It's boring. Oh my God, there's so many Daniels in the world. Every other guy is Dan. I can't even tell you how many times I've been in a room and someone's gone Dan and I've turned around with 8 other guys. It's like, okay, it's one of the other Dans. Whereas I don't think you'd have a lot of people having that confusion with Gig. It's a wonderful name.
No, and people tend to remember it, and that's the beauty of it.
Absolutely. And where's Patta from, if you don't mind me asking?
Patta's actually a shorten of my last name. My full last name is Patta Numotana.
Right. So is that Thai?
I'm Thai,
Or
yeah.
there you go. Yeah. Well, that's our neighborhood. So there's a lot of Thai names in Sydney, where I'm from. It's a huge Thai community. Uh, oh, awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me, mate.
Oh, thank you for talking to us about and Mrs. Being there in Sydney. Why don't we just start off with the obvious question: Is what drew you in that you want to direct and Mrs.
Um, long story short, I was living here in LA, and I just made my first US sitcom, which I co-created, a show called Sideswiped, which had Jason Sudeikis and Tom Lennon and Rosanna Arquette and Chris McDonald and a whole bunch of Emmy and Golden Globe winners. It was an amazing experience, and I was riding high. And one day I get a call from a mate in Sydney, and she says, "Look, I've got this friend who's coming through town. Would you have brunch with her?" And as an Australian, it's like there is a never-ending cavalcade of Australian people in the film industry coming through LA with their projects, and you're always having to have brunch with them. And I was like, "All right, fine, I'll have brunch with this girl." And I knew it was going to go well when she rocked up with 2 bottles of Prosecco, right, at 10 a.m. I was like, okay, this is my kind of people. And we had this wonderful brunch. I had a 6-month-old baby at the time who absolutely adored her. And yeah, she she was just wonderful. Melissa Bubnich is her name. She's an incredible writer. I couldn't recommend her highly enough. And as she left, she said, "Hey, would you read my screenplay for me?" And as a director in LA, there's always someone going, "Can you read my screenplay for me?" So I was like, "Sure, I'll read your screenplay." And I sat down to read it. I sat down to go to bed actually, and I thought I'll just read the first couple of pages. And so I'm leafing through, and it's like standard rom-com stuff. And then on page 5, Colin Hanks's character dies. And I was reeling, going, "What in the F just happened?" I'd never read anything like it. And I was just riveted. She then decides that she wants to marry him, even though he's dead, which sounds insane, right? And she has to overcome the law of the land, as played by Harriet Walter, who's the Lord Chief Justice, who's a 5-time Emmy nominee. You might know her as the mother from Succession, or
Yeah.
the chain-smoking Russian instructress in Killing Eve, and her family's objections, and public opinion to be able to do this. So it came to me at a time in my life where I'd just gone through something, that I hope most people never have to go through. But God, it's hard for me to talk about this today, because we've got our premiere. But I basically got a phone call one day, and my mum was on the line and saying that she was scared, because she'd been diagnosed with a rare form of dementia called FTD. It's the one that Bruce Willis has, most famous example of it. And it's a death sentence. Hopefully that'll change one day. So after 20 years of like blocking off my emotions, and I probably hadn't cried in a good 20 years because growing up in Australia, it's like boys aren't allowed to cry. There's a famous Australian expression which is take a teaspoon of cement, if you're starting to get emotional, and harden the F up. So I bawled my eyes out, and it just kind of cracked something open inside me. And comedy is my life's mission, my life's purpose, and especially making people laugh about difficult conversations. And so I absolutely loved the script, and I called Melissa up and I said, "Hey, I'd love to, produce this for you." And she was like, "Oh, that's so sweet of you. But I've already got this producer attached who's a BAFTA-winning producer called Dan Hine," which was hilarious because I'd never thought to ask her. Luckily, I met Dan, who is an incredible human being and is now one of my best friends, and I love him to bits. And we set off to make this film. And I know the premise sounds outlandish to us, although maybe I think Thai culture has which is your heritage back before, I think is a much more I would say, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe spiritually connected than Anglo-Saxon in some ways. Having spent a lot of Thailand, I love that country. But in Anglo-Saxon culture, it's the thought of marrying a dead person is completely bonkers, and communing with the dead and so on. Whereas I'd gone to high school in Paris, and in France, this is a thing. This is a thing that happens. You write to the president. 1 of 4 people are rejected. You can't just go, "I want to marry Richard Branson," or JD Rockefeller. You have to really put a body of evidence together that you are meant to get married, and that something struck you down. And one of the most famous recent examples is Etienne Cadiles, who married his longtime boyfriend, Xavier Figueles. And Xavier was a heroic policeman who died in a terrorist attack, saving tourists who got stabbed to death. And they got married in a posthumous wedding ceremony. So yeah, it's a thing that happens. It's a part of the world.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a woman who married a roller coaster, so why not?
We did? There was a woman who married a roller coaster?
They even made a movie on that one too, so.
Oh, mate, that's amazing. Well, I mean, maybe marrying your dead fiance isn't so bonkers in comparison to that. And look, it's interesting that you bring that example up, because to us, what was important was, this is a film about grief, right? And the obvious way to go with that is you play it very, very straight, and it's a very tonally it's kind of a little bit funny, but not really going for the laughs. Whereas we really wanted to make this accessible to a broad audience. So the humor is really bawdy. The dramatic stuff is extremely emotionally searing, and honest, but we wanted that tonal variety, which is a form of film that's been lost a little bit. Our touchstone was a film which is 30 years old this year, called Muriel's Wedding. I don't know if you've ever seen it. So, Muriel's Wedding, interesting aside, you can Google this and it's completely bonkers, but true. Ridley Scott's favorite film of all time. And he said this repeatedly, that it's his favorite film of all time. Obviously, Black Hawk Down and Gladiator are absolute barrel of laughs. But the thing that Muriel's Wedding did so well was that it was, you had moments of really broad humor, Like Toni Collette's on the floor. There's sailors who are naked with their willies in her face, and it's the first time she's seen a willy, and she's laughing uproariously. And then, bam, Rachel Griffiths collapses to the floor, and she's paralyzed for life. And they do it in a heartbeat, and it works. And so that was something that we wanted to explore. And luckily, I had an incredible cast of actors. The star of the film is Aisling Bea, who plays Gemma, the reluctant bride to be, who seeks to marry her dead fiancé, played by Colin Hanks, and Colin's sister is played by the wonderful Billie Lourd, and they're all incredibly powerful, dramatic actors, as well as hilarious. They're as funny as they get. And one of the unique things about the film that we realized as we were putting it together, and I wish I could say this was some kind of clever master plan, but it's just something that eventually we picked up on as people joined the film, is that we all had a really deep connection to the film because of our unfortunate bond of grief. So Aisling Bea lost her father at 3, and she talks beautifully in The Guardian about how that shaped her and made her want to be a clown. Colin Hanks, you think he's Tom Hanks' son, so his life is perfect, but he's got his own very deep connections to grief, and he talks about it quite openly in a piece we did together in The Guardian as well. And Billie Lourd, my God, it's a world famous story. She lost her mother, Carrie Fisher, and grandmother, Debbie Reynolds, within 48 hours of each other, which I can't even imagine having to deal with. Yeah. So, it was really important to us that the grief experience was authentic, and there were a lot of details in the film that came from our collective experiences. Like, for instance, Billie, lots of people came to her house and piled up books of how to deal with grief books, and she had a huge pile. So we put that in the film. Myself, I lost my mum 5 months before we started Pre. And, obviously that was incredibly devastating and the worst moment of my life. And planning the funeral was something that I'll never forget. And that was something that I wanted to put into the film because, as some of you will unfortunately, some of your readers will unfortunately know, it's very impersonal, planning a funeral. It's very commercial. And you go through a ring binder and pick out what wood you want for your casket, and what flowers, what reading, and everything's got a price tag next to it. So yeah, we wanted something that was authentic to grief, but at the same time, as taboo as it sounds, allowed you to laugh about grief. Because for a lot of people, there are moments of levity in the grief. There are moments where you get to laugh about it. And in the week leading up to my mum's passing, we knew she was going, and we all gathered around her bed, the whole family, and my mum loved singing gig. She loved it. There was one problem. My mum had the worst effing voice the world has ever heard. I mean, tone deaf cats would outsing my mum. But what she lacked in talent, she made up for in enthusiasm. And we all inherited this utter lack of musical talent and enthusiasm. And we gathered around her bed. My sisters are prodigious breeders, and they have 9 kids between the two of them. And we sang her favorite songs to her. And a moment I'll never forget is her favorite song of all time is The Rose by Bette Midler. And when we sang The Rose, my mum opened her eyes for the last time. And she looked at all of us. We all had this moment of saying goodbye. we all had this moment of saying goodbye, and it was beautiful, right? It was fucking great. You know, we went from laughing to crying to laughing.
Yeah.
And then she passed January 30th, 2022. And a week later, I got a call from my manager to say that Universal had greenlit the film. I can't help but feel Mum was looking after us. And one of the coolest parts of making the movie, mate, is you know, we're a little indie movie, so we don't have a lot of money. And you know, there'll be people out there reading that who can relate to that. And I really wanted The Rose, and my producer is like, "You are bonkers." Well, it's like The Rose is an Oscar-winning song that was at #1 for something crazy like 20 weeks. I'm making up the figures. And I wrote to Bet and I told her about my mum, and she watched the film and she loved it, and she gave us The Rose. And it blows my little mind thinking that Bette Midler knows who my mum was. And my mum, she would be chuffed. She'd be chuffed to bits to know that Bette Midler had any clue who she was. And you know, I've been lucky enough to now show the film in New York, and you know, it's open nationally at the moment. But I've seen it with audiences in New York, Sydney, London, and Edinburgh, and you know, seeing it connect with people has been wonderful. You know, in the UK at our premiere, we partnered with the UK's largest mental health charity, Mind, and the Grief Trust, which is their largest grief charity. And seeing it connect with people who are grieving has been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life, you know, and it's everything I want to do with comedy, is let people laugh about the hard things, because life's hard enough as it is. And Mrs. puts this arm around your shoulder and goes, grief sucks, but it's a part of life, and you know, you're allowed to laugh about it. And hopefully it does that. And tonight we're partnering with the Dinner Party, who are a US grief charity, and shout out to the Dinner Party, who are amazing and doing incredible work. And if you are going through it right now in America, I really recommend getting in touch with them.
Well said, Daniel. I mean, this is such a wonderful movie. I enjoy your conversation. I would love to talk to you for an hour, but of course you have plenty of people to talk to about and Mrs. I really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you very much for speaking to us. It is such a wonderful film, because any film that you get to laugh and cry and think about your own life is a success. So thank you, Daniel.
Oh, Gig, that's so nice of you to say, mate. Thank you very much.